I think a lot of what everybody here is looking forward to seeing right now, Yuki, is the match.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely get on the socials so you can be not only informed but part of the banter, being able to see, oh yeah, like this country's doing really well this week. Oh man, looks like they're about to tie. What's gonna happen? Be able to follow along that is great. So yeah, definitely follow the socials. But yeah, why don't we go right into the matches?
Yeah, like you said with banter too, if you're thinking a pink Gastro or a blue Gastrodon, there is always a heated debate going on in the
Yes.
Discord. Absolutely. I know I am repping a little bit of blue Gastrodon support. I think we are in a blue Gastrodon heavy day as well for these pairings. But if we jump right into our very first match, if we can get a look at that preview there for Jamaica and the Netherlands, we have Jourdan, Diddy, and Koen van Leeuwen. Koen has a lot of really great results as well. Denmark Open top 4, Germany Nationals top 8, and Eindhoven Regionals top 8, both in 2016. A 2-times world invite. Jourdan, a newer player from Jamaica, but Jamaica's a newer team as well. So like you said last week, there's a lot of information that you may just not know.
Yeah, definitely. As we talked about before, scouting is a big part of this competition, being able to predict what kind of strategies the opponent might like, what kind of, restricted Pokemon they might like. And yeah, we might see here that Jamaica might have more information on the Netherlands. So yeah, really excited to see how the information game will play out.
Yeah, Jourdan is a newer player, but he is going to bring a really interesting team here of the Zacian, Reshiram, Incineroar, Rillaboom, Grimmsnarl, and Zapdos, while Koen has the Blastoise, Reshiram, Zacian, Landorus, Sableye, and Rillaboom. So 2 of the exact same cores here, but entirely different team compositions.
Yes, I think there might be an error with the graphic on the Netherlands side. I believe that should be oh, sorry, maybe I'd be looking at the wrong thing, but yeah.
Oh, no, you know what? I believe it should be a Kyogre on that slot, correct?
Yes, I believe it should be a Kyogre. Glad that you held me accountable there. But yes, so assume there's a Kyogre over on Jourdan's side. That composition is a little bit something that we're more used to. I believe Stefan Mott was able to win a regionals with that exact 6 core. Over on Koen's side, on the other hand, very, very unconventional 6 Pokemon. Reshiram, has definitely made its mark in this format with partnered with the Calyrex Ice team, piloted by Alex De Pascal. But this specific combination we've definitely never seen. Certainly, I don't know if I've ever really seen a team with Reshiram and Sableye on the same team. So, really, really excited to see what kind of game plans they go for.
We might actually have those teams backwards, just as I say so currently. Diddy is the one right now with the Blastoise Reshiram team with Sableye, whereas Koen has Zacian, Kyogre, Rillaboom, Grimmsnarl, Incineroar, and Zapdos as well. So I think a little bit switched up there. Not a big deal though, because now you guys get to see exactly what we're looking at here with the team preview. So Sableye is one of my favorite Pokemon in the format. I know that me and Ben Kiriakou have a lot of similar opinions with how much we love that Pokemon. Quash is a move that I think does not get used enough. I think it's a little bit underrated, especially with that prankster ability with Sableye. However, you can't use it on some of those dark type Pokemon. So if you're facing down something like that Incineroar or the Grimmsnarl on the opposite side, you're not going to be able to use Quash on either of those Pokemon, just thanks to the way that Prankster works now. But instead, Koen is going to be sending out the Kyogre and the Grimmsnarl for a lead. A very powerful offensive move with Kyogre, plus some tankiness from the Grimmsnarl itself. But the Sableye and Blastoise are coming out for Jourdan.
Yeah, really interesting lead from both ends, both leading with a support Pokemon that is Dark type along with a Water type. So very similar on the surface. Blastoise definitely kind of free riding off of the rain that's being set by Kyogre. So, usually it might have to use like a Life Orb or something to have its G-Max move KO Grimmsnarl, but with the rain up, they might be able to just go for the knockout without any sort of, offensive spreads or items. So, definitely being able to free ride there. They both have the capability to knock out the opposing support Pokemon in one hit, so interesting to see how they'll get utility out of them before they do get knocked out.
Yeah, and as Blastoise is a Pokemon that cannot set its own rain with its Dynamax with that G-Max Cannonade there, just because it has its own secondary effect. So it does love having this water out here, and this Drizzle ability brought by this Kyogre, who is now going to Dynamax and bring on a lot of pressure with some really powerful Max Geysers, Max Lightnings maybe into that Blastoise slot, something that Blastoise is not really going to want to handle here. Sableye, though, goes for the Taunt, which is a little bit of a tougher spot when you're facing down something like a Dynamax move, but that light screen going to be helping to boost the special defense. You cannot go for a taunt onto that Grimmsnarl. Max Geyser, though, going to be coming out here, is going to do a ton of damage into either one of these Pokemon. The Sableye especially brings it down to a Focus Sash, thanks to the power of that rain as well. But thankfully, you've got it for one more turn. Their Blastoise, though, is going to go for a Yawn onto the Grimmsnarl slot. So Grimmsnarl now has to either switch out in the next turn or get put to sleep.
Yeah, interesting first turn. I think for Jourdan's end, taunt into Kyogre is not something you usually see every day, but might be something that they're doing to set up for the Rillaboom coming in from the back. Maybe predicting that the Kyogre would go for the Dynamax and wanting to ensure that they can get the KO with a Rillaboom coming in from the back. So that might be what the taunt is for.
Yeah, Grimmsnarl switches out here, not wanting to go to sleep, brings in the Zapdos, who would love to stare down this Blastoise right now. Any sort of electric-type moves from that Zapdos are going to do a ton of damage, but thanks to the Dynamax or the Gigantamax that we'll be seeing here on this Blastoise, it will be able to take some sort of hit from that Zapdos in the next couple of turns a little bit better, thanks to doubling its HP. But most importantly now, being able to put out something like a G-Max Cannonade onto that slot where the Zapdos is going to still do a great amount of damage, even with that light screen up. But the Max Lightning from the Kyogre goes into the Blastoise. It is going to eat its berry here to reduce some of that damage, but it's still going to take a pretty good chunk. Even through that Dynamax, it still does almost a quarter of that Dynamax HP there. Does set that electric terrain, most importantly, so Yawn is not going to be having any effect later on in the game unless you go into that Zapdos, who could possibly be floating off of the ground. Foul play into that Zapdos slot does a pretty decent chunk of damage there, but it does get the paralysis on this Sableye. Sableye normally not too worried, but if it wants to go for another foul play, it will be a lot slower. G-Max Cannonade from this Blastoise with the rain boost into a light screen on the Zapdos is still enough to pick out that knockout. So now that this Blastoise, with a critical hit to boot, but this Blastoise is now a lot more comfortable unless there is that Rillaboom in the back as that last Pokemon instead of the Zacian.
Yeah, and at first it seems like Jourdan has gone a little bit more mileage in the first two turns. Was able to get a knockout on the Zapdos, get a taunt up on the Kyogre, while the Kyogre was not able to knock out the Sableye due to the Focus Sash. But now that the Grimmsnarl is coming back in, has a light screen set up already. I think Koen might be able to, dish out even more damage to the Blastoise thanks to the Walking Barrier being procced and with the electric terrain. And Sableye, not a Pokemon that is known to be able to, reduce special attack damage. Might be able to do that with Will-O-Wisp, but doesn't have access to the Reflect and Light screen that the Grimmsnarl does. So, will be interesting to see if Kyogre can knock out the Blastoise here and even the Pokemon count for Koen.
Thunder Wave, though, is going to be the move of choice from the Grimmsnarl into the Blastoise on Jourdan's side. Quash from the Sableye, though, is going to slow down this Kyogre, allowing the Blastoise to possibly attack first with another G-Max Cannonade. Still going to do a great amount of damage, especially if this is into that pesky Grimmsnarl slot. Does just over 50% of its HP, but it is going to take a Max Lightning right away afterwards, and that is a ton of damage. Not enough to knock out, though, so you could possibly go for another Quash and get at least one more useful turn of your Dynamax from that Blastoise. But Kyogre shakes off its taunt, does finish up its Dynamax turn here as well, so puts him in a little bit of a nicer position maybe to start getting some big damage.
Yeah, interesting. Thunder Wave by Grimmsnarl into the Blastoise. Blastoise not a really speedy Pokemon, so usually Kyogre tends to outspeed it. So perhaps going for the paralysis, the full paralysis that turn. We'll see. We see another Quash coming out here onto the Kyogre.
Yeah, Quash from that Sableye onto Kyogre means that Kyogre is going to move a lot later, but this Grimmsnarl with Spirit Break is enough to get the knockout. So now, no more third Dynamax move from Jourdan's Blastoise. Was still able to get off two pretty powerful Cannonades here, but this Water Spout is going to be enough to knock out that 1 HP left on the Sableye.
Yes, so big turn for Koen, reversing the Pokemon count to 3-2. And without the Sableye, no more speed control that's possible from Jourdan's end. And Koen still has two Pokemon in another Pokemon in the back. So will be interesting to see if the last two that Jourdan has will be enough to give him the W.
Yeah, exactly. However, the two Pokemon that you kind of want to have facing down, both of the Pokemon on Kuhn's side, I think you couldn't get much better than having the Rillaboom and the Zacian here, along with getting that terrain change from that electric terrain to that grassy terrain. Also allows you to maybe get some good grassy glides off. You can go into that Grimmsnarl and get that knockout very quickly. However, your bigger threat's definitely going to be that Kyogre. Maybe not wanting to take something like a Thunder Wave early on, but it does give Jourdan, I think, a couple of different good options into the Pokemon on Kuhn's side.
Yes. So the Rillaboom obviously very threatening to the Kyogre. Unfortunately, the taunt is not active anymore, so the Kyogre can protect, could potentially switch out, and Jourdan could predict that and potentially fake out the Grimmsnarl, let it faint to the Cannonade damage, and the Zacian has a free attack into the Kyogre slot. So interesting. This is a pretty pivotal turn for Koen, seeing how much they can mitigate Jourdan's offensive pressure here.
Yeah, the fake out though goes into the Kyogre slot for Jourdan. There was no protect, but a reflect comes up, trying to mitigate some damage from those Behemoth Blades or other strong physical attacking moves from either of these two Pokemon. But the Behemoth Blade though is going to go into that Grimmsnarl slot, I believe, get the rest of that damage off and stop anything like a full paralysis chance from a Thunder Wave. So most importantly, just trying to handle dealing with that Grimmsnarl. But no protect is a really interesting point to make because you don't see it here. You could definitely have just gotten definitely have taken a chance there, but it is something to kind of pay attention to, especially if you're Jourdan, maybe seeing if it's holding any sort of specific item.
Yeah, so from Jourdan's perspective, prioritizing mitigating the damage from Kyogre that turn, especially with the last turn of Rain, any future attacks from Kyogre will be a little bit less powerful with no boost from the Rain. But on the other hand, Koen was able to get a pretty clutch Reflect off that turn, which will mitigate, both of the physical attackers on Jourdan's end. So perhaps Koen got a better end of the deal there, even though the Grimmsnarl was knocked out. And yeah, now it's just a matter of who can overpower who with just sheer damage. So yeah, we'll see if the Grassy Glide will be enough for the Kyogre.
Yeah, and especially, I think, because we did get a little bit of a look here at what that Grimmsnarl is running. It's not running any sort of ground-type moves. Sometimes we'll see them carry high horsepower, so there isn't anything that's going to do super effective damage to the Zacian on Koen's side. But if you can handle getting rid of that Kyogre, or at least getting it down to a very low point of its health where Water Spout's not going to do much, and maybe they have to rely on accuracy with something like an Origin Pulse if they are running maybe that Assault Vest, because we haven't really seen enough big damage to confirm it. Grassy Glide, though, even with that Reflect, does a ton of damage, not enough for the full knockout. Zacian on Jourdan's side, though, however, moves first, importantly to see here, and it does go into the other Zacian with a Behemoth Blade. Does under half of its HP there, even with its own Behemoth Blade boost thanks to that Reflect, but the Behemoth Blade from Koen's side on his Zacian goes into the Rillaboom on Jourdan's side. Definitely the more important target, does a ton of damage, but not enough for the knockout. Origin Pulse from this Kyogre. Rillaboom avoids, absolutely critical here, is just going to go into the Zacian on Jourdan's side, and it still does a good chunk of damage, but that Rillaboom avoiding it is pivotal.
Yes, absolutely. Really, like you said, if it doesn't have the high horsepower move, doesn't have that much utility against the Zacian, but definitely does against the Kyogre, and the Kyogre still sitting happy thanks to that Reflect set up by the Grimmsnarl. So that miss on the Origin Pulse, despite being resisted by Rillaboom with the amount of health it had, could have been knocked out. So yeah, pretty crucial miss over on Koen's end, but thanks to the Reflect, the Zacian might be able to take another Behemoth Blade from Jourdan's Zacian, despite being faster. So definitely not out for Koen. Just might need to make a prediction here on which one to protect.
I think if you're Jourdan here too, you have to know now that this Kyogre does not have Protect. This Grassy Glide is enough to get that knockout here. Possibly something like that Assault Vest because it is able to change moves. Zacian for Jourdan once again goes for another Behemoth Blade and goes into Koen's Zacian on his side. However, the thing with Zacian, super powerful Pokemon can only target one Pokemon at a time. The Zacian on Koen's side goes for a Behemoth Blade of his own, and that is going to target into really either one of these Pokemon. Most importantly, that Zacian on Jourdan's side is able to get the knockout, but this Rillaboom is in a little bit of a tougher spot, right? Because it just needs to get pretty much one more attack down. This Zacian is getting a little bit of HP back from that grassy terrain here, but I could be incorrect here and just remembering exactly how many turns of grassy terrain are left. I believe there is exactly one left, so if you protect through it, you may be lucky.
Yeah, like you said, it looks like there's 2 more turns of grassy terrain. Even if Koen goes for to protect this turn, might not be able to stall out entirely, but also can't stall out the Reflect, which has 2 more turns. at least and 5 more turns if the Grimmsnarl has the light clay. So yeah, definitely Koen in a better spot here. Will probably need to Jourdan will probably need to get a critical hit in order to overpower the Zacian.
Yeah, at least going for that double protect, right, just to stall out that terrain in that grassy glide. This first one goes right into that very first protect. Once again, Zacian gets a little bit of HP recovery here, which, you know, every bit counts, especially when you're in kind of a tighter end game like this. Light screen wears off, not important for 2 physical attackers.
Yes, so yeah, I think now we're just in a simplified game state, just all a matter of whether Jourdan can get that critical hit he needs to KO Koen's Zacian. Otherwise, I think it'll be a quick, easy Behemoth Blade to knock out Jourdan's Rillaboom.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because that Behemoth Blade brought it down to 25% of its HP without a critical hit, you know, with no, with that extra +1 from that boost. It does get the double protect, though, most importantly. So that does help, especially if you're trying to deal with any damage from something like this Grassy Glide. And I think Koen has managed to secure himself this end game here, as his Zacian should be faster without that priority.
Yeah, I really want to point out how clever it was for Koen to go for the double protect here. I think a lot of people think, oh, you know, not really worth going for a double protect when you're in a really advantageous position. Not something you should generally go for. But in this case, since it was the last turn of grassy terrain, you know, basically this is the only turn where Jourdan's Rillaboom could be faster than Koen's Zacian. So if he was able to get the protect, then he doesn't even have to risk the critical hit. So yeah, definitely paying off for him here and being able to land this Behemoth Blade to close out the first game.
Yeah, this Behemoth Blade is definitely going to be able to get the rest of the HP off of this Rillaboom. Does wrap up that game for Koen really nicely. You know, even in the beginning of the game for Jourdan, it did feel like he kind of had the upper hand, especially for those first few turns. However, like, especially once that Zapdos was off of the field. But even then, I still feel like Koen had that Zapdos been able to kind of produce a little bit more offensive pressure. I think it would have been a bit of a quicker end game, and that's something that maybe you could look to do next time, is maybe use that Zapdos as a Dynamax option, especially if you're trying to not take something like a Cannonade. Your Kyogre can definitely tank a couple of hits, so especially if it is that Assault Vest variant. But I think it's a really interesting kind of way to point out how many turns Thomas was probably thinking ahead, right? Because even if he lost his Kyogre, he still knew that, hey, there's so many turns left of grassy terrain, and I can stall through this just to hope that there's no critical hit.
Yes, definitely. So keeping track of those turns for rain, for the screens, for the grassy terrain is really important for this matchup. I think there's also a lot of information revealed in that game. So Jourdan's Zacian is faster than Koen's. Like you said, as you point out during the game, I believe it seems like Kyogre doesn't have access to protect. Might be one of those Assault Vest variants. So you know, a lot of information that despite Jourdan losing the first game, seems like you know, it's advantageous for his Zacian to be faster than for Koen's Kyogre not to have protect. So we'll see if he's able to put this knowledge to good use in the second game.
Yeah, and one thing I would love to see maybe is if that Sableye is able to get a Will-O-Wisp off onto a Pokemon that is not going to want to deal with being Will-O-Wisp. Something like that Zacian, maybe if that Zacian comes in early in the game. A Quash would be a really nice way to kind of keep that Zacian at bay and maybe get some big damage, but that is not going to be the lead here. It is going to be the Kyogre and the Grimmsnarl once again, and the Rillaboom and the Blastoise this time. So Rillaboom being one of the leads here, able to get a good amount of pressure off, especially with a Grassy Glide right out of the gate.
Yes, so you know, like you said, it would have been nice for Jourdan Sableye to get a Will-O-Wisp onto a physical attack like Zacian on Koen's team, but Koen not taking that bait and still going Grimmsnarl and the Kyogre, but Jourdan with an excellent adjustment, bringing in the Rillaboom instead of that Sableye, which really didn't give that much utility in the first game. And yes, obviously Rillaboom with a great matchup against the opposing Kyogre, not going to be able to just max straight from the first turn and just wreak havoc as it did in the first game. So yeah, Koen gonna have to be a little bit more careful with how they use the Kyogre.
Yeah, but this does actually put Koen at a bit of an advantage if he wants to go for a Thunder Wave, right? Because, you know, if you go for a Thunder Wave onto that Blastoise, you then are faster with it than, you know, with a Quash possibly coming out on Jourdan's side. But Rillaboom from Koen is coming out to match the Rillaboom on Jourdan's side, sending that Grimmsnarl back. Koen, however, is going to go for that Dynamax once again with that Kyogre, so that is going to be his Dynamax option for this game. Still able to put out a ton of pressure. Loves having that rain up. Could also set something like a Max Lightning once again to maybe stop something like a Yawn possibly coming back out, if that is like we saw in game 1, that Yawn onto that Grimmsnarl slot and changing that terrain. But the Rillaboom on Jourdan's side goes for a Protect, so it is not going for a Grassy Glide or any big damage into that Kyogre. Kyogre goes for the Max Lightning here, and the Walkenberry from the Blastoise will once again activate, but it's going to do a lot more damage because this Blastoise is not in its Dynamax form. It does over 50% in its standard form here, and once again sets that terrain in case this Blastoise decided to go for something a little bit more utility this turn, like this Yawn, which is not going to be doing anything thanks to the electric terrain.
Yes, this was an absolutely phenomenal first turn by Koen. The electric terrain being set up in this match has two utilities. One is the preventing the Yawn that we just saw here. The other is to get rid of the grassy terrain so that we can't see any sort of Grassy Glide action happening. So yeah, now we're gonna have to see the Rillaboom just sort of brute force its way through to the Kyogre, but being faked out like this, yes, another great turn for Koen as he gets rid of the Blastoise with another Max Lightning.
Yeah, this Blastoise was not able to do anything that it really wanted to do this game like it was last game. Kind of removed all offensive pressure. That fake out's huge too, because of that Rillaboom. It could go for something like that Grassy Glide with that helping hand and really do a ton of damage onto this Kyogre. But instead, the adjustment from game 1, Jourdan has brought his Reshiram, so maybe able to do a lot of damage. But you also, if you're using that fire type, you're not going to be able to do a lot of damage thanks to this rain.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about how, Koen has had 2 really good turns, but now Jourdan can definitely bring a comeback. He has 2 Pokemon out that resist, or that doesn't resist, but, especially with the Assault Vest on the Reshiram, not being able to dish out too much damage that the Kyogre usually does with its Max Geyser. So now that, Jourdan has 3 turns of Dynamax left while Koen only has 1, it's possible Jourdan will be able to get a lot more mileage out of this Reshiram, especially since Koen's Rillaboom probably a little bit stuck without a Kyogre, or sorry, a Blastoise that it was targeting before.
Yeah, Rillaboom goes for Protect on Jourdan's side, while the Reshiram goes for a Max Flare. Gets this off first into this Rillaboom, does a ton of damage with the rain up. It would, without the rain, it definitely would have been a knockout, but most importantly, the rain is gone now for this Kyogre, who could go for something like a Max Geyser, but instead goes for Max Strike. So a really interesting move choice that this Kyogre may have. This Max Strike goes into the Rillaboom on Jourdan's side, doesn't do a ton of damage through the Protect, but most importantly, it drops the speed of both of the Pokemon on Jourdan's side of the field. The Rillaboom on Koen's side, though, goes for a high horsepower into the Reshiram. Super effective damage, does a really nice chunk, and that is something I think for Jourdan to pay attention to, especially as he moves to the later stage of the game.
Yes, definitely. A lot of information revealed there. Seeing the Max Strike from Koen's and probably Hyper Beam in order to have access to speed control. So this also means that they don't have access to an Ice type move, because we saw Water Spout, Origin Pulse, Electric type move, presumably Thunder, and then this Normal type move. So I think Koen has been punishing Jourdan for being a little bit too passive with his Rillaboom, but now that we know that Koen doesn't have access to the Ice type attacks, if there was a game 3, Jourdan can definitely use his Rillaboom a little bit more aggressively.
Yeah, and Max Overgrowth shown here as well from the Reshiram goes into the Grimmsnarl slot, sets that terrain again, which is a really nice way to make that Rillaboom a little bit more difficult to deal with. Another high horsepower, though, onto the Reshiram, gets it down to under half of its Dynamax HP, but a Wood Hammer is the move of choice for Jourdan into the Grimmsnarl. Is enough to get the knockout there. You will take a little bit of recoil damage in return. Does get it to just above half of its HP, but this grassy terrain is pretty helpful here, restoring that HP for all the Pokemon on the field, including the Rillaboom on Koen's side. So gets it down from the red there into a little bit more of a safer spot, but still not too safe if you're facing a Max Flare.
Yes, and now if Koen has brought Zacian, probably an excellent time to bring that Pokemon in. Just as we see confirmation that Zacian's coming in here. And I think the Max Strike from Kyogre a couple turns back is really about to shine here. Koen's Rillaboom, as we saw, is now faster to attack a Reshiram, and Reshiram, a Pokemon that's usually favorable against Zacian, since both Behemoth Blade, because Behemoth Blade is resisted attacks, so may not be able to take it out from this current HP, but in combination with the high horsepower from Rillaboom, if Koen can deduce that the Reshiram has Assault Vest and can't protect, then yes, this will be a pretty good knockout on Reshiram. And it seems like it's a pretty safe move on Koen's end. with Jourdan's Rillaboom not being able to threaten the Zacian or Rillaboom too much, apart from a Grassy Glide that Jourdan might be able to do thanks to the max overgrowth that Reshiram set up last turn. So lots of good plays from both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, that really important max strike is kind of paying dividends right now for Koen because he can move faster against both these Pokemon. Rillaboom, though, is going to switch out for Jourdan. That is going to bring his Zacian into the playing field, allow possibly for grassy terrain to be set up later, and maybe take something like a... maybe take some damage instead from that Rillaboom slot, but the play ref from Zacian goes into the Reshiram, does neutral damage because of that fire type, but still does a great chunk. Max Quake from the Reshiram, though, showing that it's going faster than the Rillaboom on Koen's side, and that is enough for a full one-hit knockout onto the Zacian there. A critical hit as well, and that is a ton of damage. So actually, excuse me, it was not faster than the Rillaboom. The Rillaboom had a different target, but still very crazy to see that kind of damage maybe from both of these Pokemon here. Sorry, forgive me again. Rillaboom goes for the high horsepower, gets that knockout on the Reshiram, but I feel like Reshiram did exactly what it needed to, right? It got rid of the Zacian, which I think was a really big threat. And now, even though the Kyogre can come in, you still also have your own Rillaboom coming back in to put on some more Grassy Glide pressure, but there aren't that many turns of grassy terrain left.
Yes, that was a pretty interesting turn, seeing the Rillaboom underspeeding the Reshiram, despite having a max strike going into it. So perhaps Koen's Rillaboom is not trained to be that fast. And yeah, that definitely costs him his Zacian, especially with the max quick critical hit. So now it's looking a little bit more dicey for Koen, down to a 2v2 situation. But this time, the Zacian on Koen's end no longer existent, and the Rillaboom and Zacian on Jourdan's side definitely able to put in some work with no threat of Reflect. So now we see a fake out coming from Kyogre, and this Grassy Glide definitely not enough to take out the Zacian.
Yeah, I definitely was a little bit caught up on that speed, right? I kind of second-guessed myself, but the Behemoth Blade from this Zacian on Jourdan's side goes into the Rillaboom on Koen's side, does a good chunk of damage, enough to get that knockout here. So now, even with a critical hit, but even still, that puts them in a great position. You can go for this Grassy Glide onto the Kyogre. This Kyogre cannot protect. It has the ability to go for a Water Spout. It is still in pretty much full HP range here. However, you're not going to want to take a Grassy Glide, and we saw that there were 3 turns on that last turn, so there are still 2 turns left of grassy terrain. So I think Jourdan has put himself in a good position for this game too, and you can kind of just click some simple moves here, make sure he's not giving away too much information onto for Koen, just so that Koen doesn't have a little bit of an information advantage in the next game. But again, that Rillaboom underspeeding I think was really interesting for me, and it's something that I think Jourdan is going to be really happy to know moving forward.
Yes, like you said, lots of information being shown just in this game too. Again, seeing that Rillaboom knock out that Kyogre from basically full health. Yes, indicating that it might have a Miracle Seed item where the Kyogre is not, not trained to be so bulky. So, and on top of the Kyogre not having access to the Ice move. Again, lots of information that should make it a little bit more advantageous for Jourdan in Game 3. So. We saw in Game 2, in this game, Jourdan was the one who made the adaptation to bring in the Rillaboom, catch the opponent's Kyogre off guard. Now we'll see if Koen is able to make a similar adjustment to catch Jourdan off guard.
Yeah, and you did see as well that Zacian is running Play Rough, right? So that could be an example of 3 offensive moves with Play Rough, Sacred Sword, or Close Combat, and then Behemoth Blade, and maybe Protect as well. So it does possibly eliminate the information of maybe it carrying something like Substitute. There are a couple different ways that people run Zacian at this point. I know I ran Solar Blade Zacian, which was not the smartest move, but I did try it. It's a really interesting kind of play here. I feel like I like the change of not bringing the Sableye. I thought Reshiram put on a lot more pressure. I think the threat of Gigantamaxing your Blastoise made him take out the Blastoise earlier and allow you to get that free switch into Reshiram and change the weather, most importantly, and the terrain later on. So I think the threat of the Blastoise is really huge, but being able to use it mostly just as a utility Pokemon is really nice to kind of have as a change. Zapdos and Grimmsnarl, though, will be the lead change here instead for Koen, whereas we'll see from Jourdan's side, he is going to send out the Rillaboom and the Blastoise once again. So now, maybe a little bit more of a threat to that Walk-in Berry with the Blastoise.
Yes, Koen, just as we talked about, fires back with an adjustment that is truly excellent here. No Kyogre in sight that can be sort of taken advantage of by Rillaboom. And yeah, Zapdos is generally a Pokemon with very little weaknesses, so very safe Pokemon to bring as a lead. And despite not bringing them as a Dynamax option in the first 2 games, definitely looking like a strong contender here.
Yeah, the Dynamax already is coming right out for Koen. Most likely going to be that Zapdos here. We've seen that his Grimmsnarl is mostly for utility. Zapdos able to put on a lot of pressure with something like a Max Lightning, stop something like that Yawn once again, even a Max Airstream to change the speed here if it really chooses to do so. It's got a couple of good different options, especially in its Dynamax form. It can put on a lot of pressure. However, Jourdan is going to match that Dynamax with a Gigantamax of his own with that Blastoise. So Blastoise again being able to put on pressure with that Cannonade, getting some more residual chip damage. Because you can get chip damage onto both of the Pokemon on Koen's side, because that Kyogre is not on the field, it can definitely be very advantageous to you to just continue to get that damage every single turn and allow you to maybe tank a hit from this Zapdos. Rillaboom goes for a Protect though, no fake outs, no priority moves with a Grassy Glide here instead. Grimmsnarl goes for a Light Screen, just trying to stop some of this damage from the Blastoise on Jourdan's side of the field. However, Max Airstream will be the move of choice for this Zapdos. Just trying to get the speed up into that Rillaboom through Protect. Still does a ton of damage even through that Protect here. Rillaboom does take a good chunk, not half of its damage, but just under half. But most importantly, the speed of that Zapdos is going to raise. And Jourdan doesn't really have a lot of speed control here, but this Cannonade into the Zapdos slot is still going to do a good chunk of damage. But still, thanks to that Light Screen, it doesn't do enough, I feel like. Jourdan needed a little bit more out of that Cannonade.
Yes, definitely. It's pretty interesting. This one Kyogre to Zapdos change makes Koen's position more offensive and defensive at the same time. So the defensive part comes from not having the Kyogre set up the rain for free anymore. So Blastoise damage output, just at its normal stage, like you said earlier, Cannonade not able to set up the rain, so doesn't get that free water type boost from the weather, and at the same time, Zapdos' Max Airstreams being able to apply pressure to the Rillaboom. So yeah, Koen in a great position here, especially backed behind the Light Screen set up by Grimmsnarl.
Yeah, Reshiram swaps out for the Rillaboom, not wanting to take something like another Max Airstream. Thunderwave from the Grimmsnarl into the Blastoise is going to slow it down even more and possibly get a full paralysis and waste one of these all-important Gigantamax moves or Dynamax moves. Another Max Airstream onto the Reshiram slot does take that far better than the Rillaboom did. Takes about 40% of its HP there, but again, another speed boost for both of the Pokemon on Koen's side. But a Max Hailstorm into the Zapdos is going to do some really important super effective damage, but still not a lot of output there in terms of damage. Does set up some more residual damage, so the Pokemon on Koen's side will be taking both the hail damage and also the G-Max Cannonade damage every turn, but so will Jourdan's Pokemon be taking that hail damage as well.
Yes, Grimmsnarl is staying in compared to last time where the Zacian switched in and took a little bit too much damage. So great for him to preserve the Zacian in the back and spread out on the Thunder Waves, even though the speed aspect of the paralysis not mattering too much, hoping to get the full paralysis to get some incremental advantage, and then set up the Reflect at the very end, right as Grimmsnarl is about to get knocked out, like in previous games. So excellent playing by Koen, and yeah, we'll see if he's able to continue applying the pressure here.
Another Thunder Wave from that Grimmsnarl onto the Reshiram on Jourdan's side. Again, really trying to fish for some pretty important move, full paralysis here, but a Max Lightning from Koen's Zapdos into the Blastoise, once again activating that Walk-in Berry, which is huge because it does not take nearly as much damage as we saw in that last game. We saw last game when it is not in its Dynamax form, that does over 50% of its HP, even with that Walk-in Berry as the held item. But a full paralysis from the Reshiram here, thanks to that Thunder Wave, but the Blastoise does get that Cannonade off here. No full paralysis for this turn, just consistently getting chip damage onto this Zapdos, and even still having more damage every single turn it wears on after a while. And the Zapdos, not being able to fully knock out this Blastoise who's been able to tank, I think is really important moving forward, because that Zapdos cannot survive another turn of residual damage on the field.
Yes, so Zapdos either have to switch out or get full utility in this last turn of Max. One thing to point out is that both trainers seem to be targeting the opposing trainer's Dynamax Pokemon instead of the support Pokemon. At least for Jourdan's end, could have knocked out the Grimmsnarl potentially last turn if they had targeted it down instead of the Zapdos. So yeah, it seems like they are seeing the Dynamax Pokemon as more of threats, and especially for Koen's end, if the Grimmsnarl can survive to face down Jourdan's Zacian, we'll be able to get a Thunder Wave off, get a Reflect off. So Jourdan might want to get rid of that Grimmsnarl soon, so that yeah, the Zacian can come in without any sort of Thunder Wave to disturb it.
Yeah, however, if you lose this Zapdos as well, it is important to note that you did gain 2 max Airstream boosts. Its Roost, though, is going to be able to restore a bunch of HP, will ground it for this turn, but I don't believe that's all that important in the face of these 2 Pokemon here. Spirit Break is the move choice from Grimmsnarl onto the Reshiram. Does a pretty decent chunk of damage, does also drop that special attack for Reshiram. Fusion Flare, though, move of choice, going to be able to do a good chunk of damage onto either of these Pokemon, but like you said, that Grimmsnarl is a pretty good target here. Does a small chunk, but Icy Wind. Now we see another form of speed control on Jourdan's team. Does damage to both of these Pokemon, drops their speed 1 stage. They're still at +1 for that speed, but I feel like you were really hoping for that Zapdos to go down here, and that Roost did put a bit of a wrench in your plans, because now the Zapdos can hang around and still be faster.
Yes, definitely. Koen's information management really coming to shine in Game 3. Zapdos not really making its mark in the first 2 games, and now that they're the ace Pokemon, as you will, in this Game 3, conserving that Roost to the very end. Now that all of Jourdan's attacks during while his Blastoise was in Gigantamax, not really coming to fruition with the Roost healing it all up. So yeah, excellent conservation of energy of information on Koen's end. And yeah, now we face down a Kyogre who's ready to get some water spouts.
Yeah, that Grimmsnarl did get knocked out thanks to the Cannonade damage, so was not able to set up a Reflect or get a Thunder Wave off onto possibly that Zacian in the back for Jourdan. The Rain is now up, though, possibly for this Blastoise, but Blastoise is slow, right? It's still not going to want to take something like a Thunder or a, even a Hurricane here, if that is the move of choice, onto the Reshiram, because thanks to this Rain, those moves now are at full accuracy, and the Hail is gone. So now losing that Hail, you do have at least the option for losing that Hail, you have at least the option to maybe not take as much residual damage. Kyogre's not going to take any Cannonade damage either from those Gigantamax moves, thanks to its water typing. Zapdos once again goes for another Roost. This is going to heal it back up pretty much all the way up to full, just close though. And again, it's just sitting here and being really pesky. Water Spout from the Kyogre onto both of these Pokemon is enough for a knockout onto the Reshiram, thanks to the Rain especially. However, Blastoise is still able to hang on, not very effective onto that Pokemon, but now the Icy Wind, most importantly, continues to slow these Pokemon down. Kyogre being brought down to -1, while the Zapdos is now at neutral speed. A critical hit onto the Zapdos as well, I believe, if I misread that. Not like that really matters too much, as it's not the strongest move in the game here, but it will allow for both of the whatever Pokemon Jourdan sends in to be faster than those Pokemon on that side of the field.
Yes, and this is a really important turn for Jourdan, deciding whether to bring in the Zacian or the Rillaboom. Especially if the Rillaboom comes in not super favorable against the Zapdos, able to get off those 100% accurate Hurricanes. So yeah, really curious to see if the Rillaboom will basically be utilized just to knock out the Kyogre, or whether Jourdan is using the Rillaboom as a bait so that the Blastoise can get off a crucial yawn now that there's no electric terrain, putting it in its tracks. So yeah, interesting to see how Rillaboom will act this turn.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is you cannot get fully paralyzed anymore unless you're the Blastoise, right? But you don't have to deal with that Grimmsnarl being so pesky. Kyogre, though, switches out, brings in the Zacian here, possibly trying to bait out something like a Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom on Jourdan's side. It would still take a small amount of damage, but we already have seen that this Rillaboom is not running a ground type move, especially as Protect is shows all 4 of the moves that we've seen. Zapdos uses Hurricane, though, 100% accurate into that Rillaboom, but that Protect does save it there from taking that super effective damage. Hydro Cannon from the Blastoise into the Zapdos is enough for a knockout, thanks to that Rain as well. So a ton of damage. You get rid of that Pokemon that's been sitting around and being so frustrating, and now you even have the opportunity. You're still hanging on here. Maybe you could go for another Icy Wind, slow down this Zacian and Kyogre, possibly, but you were faster than them in the past few games.
Yeah, excellent turn by Jourdan. As we talked about in the previous turn, was using Rillaboom as a bait to get the Zapdos to focus it down while threatening the Kyogre on Koen's end. And yeah, that Kyogre retreated, not able to get that crucial knockout on the Blastoise's turn. And then in return, that Blastoise was able to get the knockout on the opposing Zapdos that was being really hard for the Rillaboom. So yeah, now the Rillaboom able to get a free Grassy Glide off onto the Kyogre slot. I believe there's no Reflect up, so this is probably looking like a KO.
Correct, there is no Reflect, so that is a full one-hit KO from the Rillaboom onto the Kyogre, getting rid of that Kyogre before it can really do any damage output. Behemoth Blade from this Zacian, though, into either one of these Pokemon is going to do a ton of damage. This Rillaboom especially doesn't want to take it. It is enough for the knockout, because we saw how much it did in that game one. I feel like it was pretty close to the edge there of what that damage roll would be. However, there is a recharge here thanks to that Hydro Cannon needing that extra turn to get a little bit of a break, but you do get some more HP recovery from the grassy terrain, and Zacian switches in as the last Pokemon for Jourdan.
Yes, and it's quite interesting how both of these games, the tempo in the first few turns in the mid part of the game seems to be quite different. But yeah, now that we're back to a 2v1 situation, and the Zacian on Koen's side, we know is slower. There's no Reflect up. It seems like Jourdan was able to get themselves out of a tough spot, and yeah, barring some paralysis, this might be Jourdan's game to win.
Yeah, I think losing that Grimmsnarl to that residual damage was huge thinking back on it now. Behemoth Blade from Jourdan's Zacian goes into the Zacian on Koen's side, does well, just about 3/4 of its HP. However, another Behemoth Blade in return does about the similar amount. The Hydro Cannon, though, from Jourdan's Blastoise, because that was not targeted, goes into the Zacian, is enough to finish it off, and that will give Jourdan the win here for Jamaica over the Netherlands, which is absolutely huge, I believe, going into this game as well, because at this point we didn't have any results turned in yet for this week, so it was currently 0-0 for both of these teams, and gives the Netherlands their first watch, gives Jamaica their first win. So now Jamaica gets to kind of show how strong they are right out of the gate. I love Sableye teams. I'm sad that Sableye wasn't really the Mon that would have done the most work there for Jourdan. However, really interesting to see how both of those trainers, like you said, the last turns ended up becoming a little bit slower, but in a way that is still really interesting, because you go from having these high offensive moves every turn to really starting to have to break down how your end game looks.
Yes, one of the interesting parts about VGC is that even though it's the same games and the same format, you have so many different kinds of matchups. And in this matchup, you don't have that much Pokemon switching in and out and rotating. You don't have Pokemon like Porygon 2 or Dusclops, who are known to be good pivots for Pokemon. It was just all out attacking. Who's going to Dynamax first? And yeah, that's why we had those end games where it's kind of Zacian facing off against the Zacian, and who had the better setup for the Zacian on their side to take the win. So really excellent game. We saw a really good adjustment from both ends. But yeah, Jourdan came out on top, and Jamaica starting off 1-0. I can't imagine how good it must feel for them as a new team, not really having the confidence that other more established teams might have with the results from the previous years. But yeah, with Jamaica on a clean slate starting 1-0, excited to see if they will be able to take this momentum into the other matches this week.
Yeah, and one quick thing I also wanted to mention too is both of those teams' forms of speed control were very situational, right? Because that Zapdos, its form of speed control was Max Airstream, which it could only use while Dynamaxed, whereas Blastoise's form of speed control in that Icy Wind, it could only use while not Dynamaxed, right? So you have to kind of play into those. The Sableye did not come to those second two games, so you could not use Quash. The Thunder Wave from the Grimmsnarl was another option. However, once that Grimmsnarl was out of the gate, was out of the game, it became a little bit tougher, right, to kind of control that speed on both sides. So it's interesting to see, especially with teams even thinking back a couple months ago to Rinya's Sun that did not have a ton of speed control. A lot of it was those max Airstreams from Charizard, or even if you're running Thunder Wave Grimmsnarl, going for that same thing. So interesting to see how much these trainers both kind of relied on speed, but how their speed control was so, again, situational, I feel like is the only word I can really use to describe it. But love both of those teams from both of those trainers.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, like you said, I think situational is the great way to explain it. Something like Trick Room or something like Tailwind, not really dependent on the individual Pokemon to stay in to have that speed control. You kind of just get it for a couple turns once it's set up. And both these teams not really having access to either of those moves So yeah, a Pokemon like Sableye, if it's not able to get utility, other than the move like Quash, not being able to provide that much value otherwise. So and I think it was a great call for Jourdan to sort of not bring it in the game 2 and game 3. So yeah, a really really interesting match to watch. Really highly technical and skilled. So yeah, really excited to see what it's going to be like to see the rest of the matches today.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, we will be taking a quick break. We will be coming back with the second match of the day of the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon VGC qualifiers week 1. So stick around, do not go anywhere.